Thank you. Oh, man, I love it. Well, good afternoon, Regina. It's really a pleasure to be with all of you. I got to tell you, this idea is terrific. Bringing the community together to think about ways to transform all aspects of the community, thinking about long-term economic growth, thinking about changing the way your relationship works with the government and your fellow citizens. This is an area that's been near and dear to my heart since the president issued that first Declaration on Open Government on day one of the Obama administration. And it was a bit challenging. I hadn't yet been confirmed by the United States Senate, but the president had us on the clock. We had to get moving to provide recommendations on how we would make our government more transparent, more participatory, and more collaborative. And throughout my remarks, I'll share with you a bit about that story. But to get started, I thought I would take you as far away from Washington, D.C. as one could get in public service. If I could get to the next slide, I would love to take you to India. One of the most personally rewarding moments for me, as you could probably guess by my name, Manish Chopra, that I have a heritage from India. And joining President Obama on a trip to my father and my mother's home country was a bit inspiring. But what was more inspiring was the relationship that technology and open data and innovation has played in the communities in India that I had least expected it to impact. The president was limited in his travels. He was only in the urban settings, visited New Delhi, visited Mumbai. But it was important for him to visit the community to visit a community in Rajasthan that could best be described as rural, and rural in the sense of the traditional model of infrastructure still to come. You see, the community in Rajasthan the president wished to connect with had no indoor plumbing, no infrastructure to speak of in the traditional sense of paved roads, certainly no airport within any real reasonable distance. But the community was connected to fiber optic broadband and had a 4G WiMAX tower in the dead center of the village. I had the pleasure of inaugurating that center 3 months prior to the president's visit. You see, the country of India has made the judgment that it wants to connect every one of their, they call them panchayats, which are basically small little communities or towns, 250,000 of them, they want to connect them to ultra-high-speed broadband and mobile technologies within the community. So fiber to essentially a government town center, and WiMAX to connect the area for families, residents more generally. And the president felt that it was important to celebrate how technology and innovation was transforming society, not just in the urban environments, but in our rural communities. And so he decided to conduct essentially a two-way high-definition video conference with the residents of this community that had only 90 days prior been accessing mobile broadband or high-speed broadband if they used the computers in the city's government center. The president heard three very specific stories. I'll just share one. A young man stood up, I must imagine with some courage, to describe to the president what broadband has meant for him in the community with which he lives. He shared with the president a story. About a year earlier, he had tried to borrow money to pay for the seeds to grow crops on his farm. And in India, you can't borrow money unless you can prove you have access to your land title. Jeff and I were just chatting about this. Well, unfortunately for this young man, he had encountered what might be charitably described as friction when asking an office, a government official, to produce the official copy of his land records so that he could take it to the bank and borrow the money for the seeds. I suppose the charitable way of describing it is he wasn't able to pay the premium fee that was undisclosed or not necessarily part of the official system in order to get that record, so he was unable to get that document. He had traveled, hundreds of miles to the county government seat and to get the data and couldn't get the data. he was forced to go to a money lender that charged him exorbitant rates to pay for the seeds that went into the land. But he said to the president, "I'm so thankful for this service because there's now a kiosk in the in the village that allows him to download an electronic copy of his own land records so that this year, with no marginal cost, he was able to get the bank loan and to grow the crops that would keep his family afloat in the following year." In response to this story and the three others that the president heard directly, he said the following: "One of the incredible benefits of technology is that it can position one to leapfrog some of the intermediate stages of government service delivery, avoiding some of the 20th century mechanisms for delivering services and going straight to the 21st. You see, one of the challenges in communities around the world that are engaging in open government is to set a benchmark and say, you know what, we want to catch up. You might say, hey, we like what the U.S. is doing, and you might. I take no pride in saying we're in a great place or not, but it's a judgment for you. But that's the wrong ambition, to catch up. What the president was speaking to was a broader vision of leapfrog. It says, no, it's not about us following what you've done, but rather to share with you what our vision for society should be. That we could leapfrog what might be a hindrance or a barrier. We could overcome it here because we've got a sense of community and assets that allow us to really invent a better relationship between our citizenry, our economy, the ground. To carry the story forward, we collaborated. The president announced this on the trip. It was December of 2009. The president announced this pretty interesting collaboration. He says the United States and India will form a joint venture, basically, the U.S.-India Open Government Dialogue. And unlike most diplomatic conversation, this was not about really fancy people wearing suits sitting opposite each other at boardroom tables, negotiating treaties. This was going to be an altogether different proposition. You see, we formed a community on GitHub, and we used Skype and other means to communicate. We jointly developed the source code for an open source version of data.gov. The platform that my colleague Vivek, if you saw our video, would have demonstrated was the centerpiece of our open government activity. Now, by the way, freely available to anyone to use, whether it be here in Regina or anywhere across the provinces around the world, free. The open government platform. So we initiated the program, and it was part of a larger movement to take the ideas of a new relationship out beyond Washington and into the halls of power. Now 55 countries around the world, including Canada, have pledged to adopt the principles of open government, and many have already provided specific and tangible commitments to make it real. I encourage you to read the Canadian Open Government Plan, which is now publicly available, as all of them are, at opengovpartnership.org. But I share this story at the outset because it is obvious that the way we are going to solve the big problems that confront our societies will not be because a brilliant politician figured it out from the top down, but rather our ability to empower citizens from the bottom up to experiment and tinker and change. The heroes of our countries, our communities, will be those like Tony Webster, whose story I'd like to share with you now. He's the handsome gentleman standing beside Dr. Jill Biden, wife of the United States Vice President Joe Biden, who had visited San Francisco in the offices of Code for America to celebrate a whole range of innovators and entrepreneurs, big companies to startups, who embraced the principles of open government to help American soldiers who are coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan return to a civilian economy. What is Tony's story, and how is it relevant to describing for you what open government and open innovation is? I want to take us back to August of 2011. The president delivered a major speech announcing the return of all of our troops from Iraq and a commitment to draw down our work in Afghanistan. In this speech, the president issued a bold challenge. To the companies of the United States, he said, I ask that you hire a veteran. And he challenged to hire 100,000 veterans by the end of the next year. That is, by the end of 2012. Well, we had a bit of a problem. How will veterans know which companies had made the pledge? And vice versa, how will companies ensure that when they make a pledge, they know how to reach a veteran? Classic market information problem. Government 1.0 would have asked that we create some big, massive database. We hire some big contractor, we build this system, we tell every employer in America, please place your job postings with www.findyourveteransforjobemployment.gov, and we would have had an interface for veterans so that they could search. Never mind that most people today use the internet for searching. We would have created this sort of separate animal all to itself. It would have cost us a lot of money. It would have taken us a year to actually procure it, and it's not sure it would actually achieve the mission objective. So that was not the path we could pursue. We had to choose an alternative path, an open and collaborative path. Now, where do you find information online? I presume you might visit a search engine. Dare I say Google, or Bing, or Yahoo. So I asked the search engines, how easy is it for you to discover job postings on the internet? They said, well, Anish, guess what? Of all the things that's on the internet, job postings are still proprietary. We really don't have a common standard for how to mark up a job posting. So I'm sorry, it's not going to be as easy as you thought. I said, well, how hard is it to write a job posting schema? They said, not very hard. So I asked my intern to do it. We didn't have a lot of staff, you see. We're under fiscal constraints. My intern, literally my intern, David Jabot, spent about a week and a half looking at schemas. He visited schema.org, which is a nonprofit coalition of the search engines that allows you to produce structured markup language for the web. And we put together a job posting schema with about a dozen, maybe 24 variables. We then shopped it around to those who are in the job postings business, Monster.com and others. And we got rough consensus within 30 days. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, not that controversial. We added one provision. We called it special commitment, and it allowed us to write the word vet commit. That is a job posting that comports to the standard that adds this little bit of code that said vet commit would be a public signal that this particular job posting is meant for veterans. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. By 90 days after the president's challenge, after going through this sort of back and forth, we launched this very simple tool called the Veterans Job Bank. But it was poorly named. It was quite the opposite of a bank because it was not a single database to rule them all. It was nothing more than a search filter scouring the entire internet looking for all job postings that happened to include the markup language we had just developed 30 days earlier that happened to have the word vet commit in the metadata. Grant, we had 800,000 jobs tagged when the president launched the initiative in November of 2011. And that was interesting. But that's not Tony Webster's story, because that's only half of the equation. That's the supply side. Are there jobs that happen to include a hiring commitment for veterans? What about the demand side? How will veterans access this information? Must they visit the Veterans Job Bank at www.whitehouse.gov/veterans? Or is there an alternative method to syndicate this information throughout the internet so that it meets people where they are, not directs them to a place they wouldn't otherwise know to go? So we decided to open up all of this data. 3 pieces of data to be specific. Number one, we asked the military to open up the resume data for everyone that's left the military. Because, you know, they've done a lot of great work, but it's written in military jargon. You know, I was an infantryman, or I was a gunner, or whatever. So we said, Can you disclose to the individual the electronic version of their military resume? Check. We launched Blue Button a month after the launch of the Veterans Job Bank. For veterans, the VA did it under our VA's great CTO leadership, Dr. Peter Levin, and we had the ability at no cost for anybody who's a veteran to download a soft copy of their military resume. Number two, the Labor Department happened to have the crosswalk table that maps civilian skills to the military skills. So we said, can we open source that? And that happened to have a programming interface, so we made that available. And finally, we asked that the Jobs Bank itself set up an API so that instead of having to visit and manually enter the search query, one can do it through basically this programming interface. With these three pieces of data, we invited LinkedIn and Google and a bunch of startups we never heard of to start building apps in the spirit of helping veterans find jobs. On Tuesday, January 18th, at 4 p.m., I visited the headquarters of a cloud computing company called Twilio, where I had been given the green light by White House Communications to officially announce that 24 hours later, Dr. Jill Biden will be in San Francisco to celebrate these apps for heroes. There was nothing particularly interesting about that in the Twilio room. I just was excited to say it, so I said, hey, by the way, none of you were invited, but tomorrow we're having this really cool event, and I'm excited to tell you about it. The CEO of Twilio raises his hand. He says, Anish, Jeff Lawson, can I come to the event? I said, Jeff, you have to build an app to help a veteran find a job. He goes, okay. I said, no, really, you have to build an app, and the event is literally 24 hours from now. He goes, no, we can do it. I said, well, I got to commit. Secret Service has to approve all the names. I'm not even so sure you could even come. He says, no. Seriously, if we built you something, give me a deadline. I said, okay. And this is in a room, a lot of people. I said, all right, thinking on the fly. If you get me an app by 8 o'clock in the morning, I'll see if I have enough time to get Secret Service to vet the person and let them in. So an hour and a half after the event concluded, he sends out a flash challenge on Twilio. Meet Dr. Biden. You got to build an app, and here are the 3 data sources. Tony Webster finished the job in less than 2 hours. He built HeroJobs.org, that simple interface that you see pictured above him. You see, there are only 3 variables in HeroJobs.org. What was your military occupation code? That's the equivalent of your resume. What's your zip code? And your cell phone number. Armed with these 3 pieces of data, Tony Webster's cute little app will text message you 5 of the most relevant job openings for you based on your skills in your neighborhood every morning at no charge. That's live. Thousands of veterans are using it. Now, if the government were to have issued an RFP, we would never have even envisioned this functionality, let alone have it come to life and to celebrate them. This is part of President Obama's larger vision for how the American economy shall grow in the next decade and beyond. It's what he calls his strategy for American innovation. And I share this slide not because I want you to read it, just to reference the fact that it exists at whitehouse.gov/innovation. But the principle of it is very simple. A country that will achieve economic success will be that country that invests in the building blocks of innovation, which traditionally was roadways, railways, and runways, but it is now mobile broadband. Will set rules of the road, including open government rules that spark the liberation of data and encourage entrepreneurship and innovation to foster in communities around the country. And third, it will seed big challenges of our day in healthcare and energy and education with the resources in data that can be the kindling, if you will, for breakthrough ideas that will solve the problem. It is this formula that I would love to share with you the 5 key areas that I believe, perhaps in Regina, you guys could lead, leapfrogging the United States, if I may say, on the opportunities, on these global challenges that are in front of us. The first of our challenges is the challenge around digital infrastructure. The challenge here is a mixture of 2 things. One, do we have mobile broadband to 98% of the population, as President Obama challenged us when he launched the National Wireless Initiative? But number 2, are we using that infrastructure to achieve a problem in the United States dating back to 9/11? the lack of interoperable communications amongst our first responders. Are there apps for our heroes who serve us and keep us safe? As an example, in the United States, the average profile of a missing child is an 11-year-old girl. And as the father of 2 children, 2 daughters, this is particularly concerning for me. The profile is an 11-year-old girl. And the statistics show that if you don't find her in 3 hours, you won't. The police don't find out about this until at least 1 hour, often the 2nd hour mark, which means our first responders have an hour to find that poor little girl. In an analog radio world, they lack the capacity to analyze leads. So they're literally talking, hey, I just talked to this neighbor and they gave me an idea and this neighbor over here said something else. Imagine an app that allows you to canvass the community and analyzes the data in real time to find out where's the best place to allocate scarce resources to find that 11-year-old girl. Thanks to the President's National Wireless Initiative, we've launched that app's economy. In Tennessee, our FBI is collaborating to figure out ways to bring this kind of computing power on 4G mobile broadband so we can, in fact, recover more of our young children. I presume, not know for sure, that you would have a similar desire to ensure your first responders take full access of what you and I as civilians treat as commonplace with our smartphones in our pockets and our tweets that we use so regularly. Option number 2, can we modernize our energy sector? You see, in the United States, as all over the world, there's this active debate about how we transition to a cleaner energy economy. We say this in a world of natural resources where we are looking at doing what we can to pull what we can out of the ground, and you guys are clearly well positioned to succeed in that part of the economy. But there is this larger global conversation taking place in the next decade and beyond as to how we start to balance our supply of energy. No matter where anyone is personally on the debate of what type of energy source is right for the country or the world, there is unanimous agreement that one thing for sure should be done. Individuals in their personal lives should be provided the information they need to be more energy efficient. You don't want the heat running when you're not at home, the AC running when you're not at home, in periods of time when it otherwise would be kicking in. Some studies indicate that 20 to 30% of energy is actually poorly applied, misallocated, utilized when it wasn't achieving a quality of life benefit. So we announced an open government initiative around this particular problem. And it's a simple one. You see, the utility companies in the United States, for the most part, still provide customers their consumption data in their bill in one value at the end of the month. Yet many of them have now built the infrastructure, smart meters to be sure, are a part of it, but it's other pieces as well, that could collect information about your consumption every 6 seconds. So we asked a very simple question. How should individuals access the full stream of data about their energy usage? So in June of 2011, the President released the strategy for modernizing the nation's smart grid. Electrical grid, we call it smart grid modernization. And in that provision, we had a very simple premise. Consumers should have access to their data in machine-readable form, not only because it's helpful for their immediate information gathering needs, but it could serve as rocket fuel for third-party applications of the sort that Tony Webster built that we couldn't even envision today. So, in October, I issued a bit of a challenge. I teased the industry. I gave a speech at the utilities gathering, and I said, I want in 90 days a commitment to opening up energy data in a common, consistent format. We called it Green Button. 3 of our favorite utilities in California, the biggest 3, voluntarily agreed. They weren't required by law, and we didn't pay them for it. They voluntarily agreed to be the first to adopt Green Button. And that's the picture of that young lady, Karen Austin, the CIO from PG&E, who made the judgment herself. She's the hero of the Green Button story. She invited me and her peer CIOs from the other utilities for a 3-hour session. And in one meeting, we reached consensus and made a public commitment to go live by January of 2012. One meeting. And they lived up to their end of the bargain. I joined them in January, and they launched this open initiative, Green Button, to 7 million American households in California. On a Wednesday, I believe, was the launch. That Sunday, I was to serve as a judge at the Clean Web Hackathon in New York City, where entrepreneurs and innovators would have access to Green Button data that had only gone live 3 days earlier. Grant? And one of the most impactful applications that was built over the weekend was the Watt Quiz. This gentleman, this team, combined two very powerful sources of data. One was the energy consumption data for an individual, but two were the rate plans that the California Utility Commission had negotiated. It turns out they have 300 rate plans in California. You could have time of use, time of day, emergency time of day, et cetera, et cetera. By mashing up these two data sets, the Watt Quiz can tell this one individual whose data they pulled that you could save 45% on your energy bill if you switched your rate plan, because of how you use your energy conforms with some of the variable pricing models that could benefit you. In one weekend, 4 days, essentially, after the launch of Green Button, applications like the Watt Quiz were born and are live. 90 days after that, in March, 27 million Americans now live and are served by utilities who have voluntarily pledged to offer Green Button service. From 0 last October to 27 million in commitments, no taxpayer dollars, no change in law. Voluntary adoption of an open initiative. Number 3, healthcare. In the United States, healthcare is one of the most vexing policy challenges of our lifetime. It is clearly an area that the Canadians have taken a great deal of pride in. But for us, we are grappling with the right balance of cost, access, and quality. And again, borrowing a page from open innovation, we have relied on the ingenuity of the American people to try very simple innovations that we could never have dreamed of had we, from the central government down, dictated how this should all work. We're opening up healthcare data, spending data, quality data, personal health information, and so forth. My personal favorite is Asmopolis. Asmopolis was a single researcher from the Centers for Disease Control, Dr. David von Sickle, one individual. He looks just like any one of you. He happens to live in a rural part of Wisconsin, north of Madison. He doesn't have broadband. Grant? We should have gotten him an invite to this amazing conference. David von Sickle had a very simple concern. Kids with asthma who suffer unnecessarily end up in the emergency room. It's the second biggest reason you show up in the emergency room is you have an asthma attack. This is an information problem, David von Sickle postulated. So he did something pretty simple. He invented a little chip that takes your GPS coordinates and makes it as seamless to use with your inhaler. You see the picture of the asthma inhaler? You depress the asthma inhaler and it triggers a location of where you're standing, your GPS location, and the time of day. He crowdsources this information. You can see one of the, you could barely see it, but whatever. It's a little geographical plot of all of the encounters that he has developed, and he's open sourced the macro information because he figured out, based on your personal travel patterns, there's probably an insight as to what triggers your next attack in your daily life. He experimented with presenting this information back to the individuals, and he cut by 50% the uncontrollable, unexpected asthma attacks. just by providing information. Now, we're testing that model across the country. And he's raised investment capital. He's going to create a startup. He's going to make lots of money. And if David von Sickle becomes the next Zuckerberg multi-billionaire because he happened to have invented a model that lowers the American healthcare costs while improving quality of life for kids with asthma, I would say, God bless you. You deserve a celebration. Our president will shake your hand. This is the third opportunity, opening up health data in new and creative ways. Number 4, we want our kids to succeed in the global economy. And one of the best ways that our kids, no matter where they live in Regina or anywhere else, you want to educate your kids. And based on most research, you want to educate them in areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or at least expose them to those disciplines. Yet in the United States, we spend nearly $700 billion in education, but our results don't match up to the investment levels. The level of our college completion rates, we used to be the number 1 in the world, we're now less than number 10. We used to be the best in the world in math and science, and we've 23, 25, depending on what benchmarks you use. I think Canada actually is probably beating us on math and science. I have to go check. So the question is, it's not a function of how much money you spend, because we're spending more than anybody else on the planet. It might be a function of information. What's the right lesson to share to one child, my child, based on how they learn so that they can capture and master the subject matter? So we believe, the president believes, that one of the opportunities in education is to invent a personalized learning system. When we studied the best teachers in America, what makes them great was not that they orated better than others. You can't just push record and post their videos like Khan Academy. I love Khan. Salman Khan's a great guy. I visited his for early adoptions. It's not about being a great lecturer. The best teachers personalize the material to the students that they are responsible for. So it's not one way to teach fractions. It's thousands of possible ways that you draw from based on the unique permutations of the child's response. That's an information problem. So we've opened up a new educational data initiative. One of these ideas is the Learning Registry, all of which you could use today. The Learning Registry is very simple. It's an internet on top of the internet that allows us to curate all of the learning material on the web that happens to map back, in the US example, to the Common Core math standards. Millions of objects on the web. One of them would be the Mars rover video. The interesting question is, how are teachers using the Mars rover video in the classroom? And is there a secondary market to know which lesson plans of the teachers that used the Mars rover video in the classroom had the biggest impact? And is there a ratings and reviews system to say which ones happen to have the better response for kids of a certain type? Maybe they're minority children or they're children with learning disabilities. It's an information problem. So the Learning Registry has 3 basic principles. 1, tag the content so it'd be found on the internet like any other search term. You could see a Mozilla plugin that allows you to find all learning materials that happen to be tagged to, in this case, the Common Core standards for surface area and volume. Number 2, ensure that those learning objects, when incorporated into lesson plans, can be discoverable by other teachers. That's the lesson plan system there that you see in the middle. And then finally, sharing in a social media context how those lesson plans are used. So here you know that the Mars rover video has been incorporated into a lesson plan by an engineering teacher in the Career and Technical Education platform. Number 5. Grant, we got to improve customer service. United States government is embarking on an unbelievable change in our healthcare insurance system by providing these new health insurance exchanges. 30 million Americans will be able to have access to health insurance than never before. But they're going to face, we have a choice to offer them. Will they walk into the Postal Service or the DMV or motor vehicles? Or will they walk into a 21st century Netflix-like customer experience? We launched a website in 90 days called healthcare.gov, a comprehensive index of all of the insurance plans, public and private, that are available based on your zip code. And what we've done in this particular example is found a way to extend the value of a government website, a healthcare.gov site, but in the spirit of Tony Webster, to extend access to that information using standards like OAuth, so that we could extend so that you wouldn't even know it's called healthcare.gov. You're searching for it with Joe's Insurance Finder or any other startup. We borrowed a page from Netflix. When Netflix decided to build an iPhone app, they didn't build one in-house. They used open innovation. They used OAuth to allow third parties to create tools that could connect, based on standards, with the Netflix queue management system. But to protect privacy and security, they had the consumer mediate the relationship. So Netflix allowed dozens of companies to create products and to compete for my mind share, to compete on customer service. What's the most effective way for me to change my queue when I'm on my mobile phone? They didn't want to have one method for me to choose, they wanted dozens. And they created a business relationship where those companies can engage. We are using those technical standards, like OAuth, as the foundation for how we want the health insurance exchanges to look. But we believe this is a larger vision for how government customer service can be extended. You don't just have to conduct business on a .gov website. We are increasingly trying to syndicate access to those transactions so they can occur where you are, as opposed to making you visit our sites. I'll end with this one final observation. I am so proud that you in this community are gathering for this very conference, because it is very likely that in 90 days from today, you will have created something, modest though it may be, or miraculous it might be, that will make the lives of the Regina residents just that much better. But it requires leadership. We're giving Grant a lot of love today for bringing you together. But it's people like Grant that we attract into this ecosystem to come together to challenge us to make a difference. And I'll just share two examples before I wrap and maybe take a question or two. It's a story of Doctors Peter Levin and Katie Stanton, who are creating the capacity for change by blending this world between what's government, what's private sector, what's nonprofit. In Peter's case, he wanted to liberate healthcare information and that military service information I mentioned earlier. He created the healthcare blue button in 90 days. The president issued a challenge in August. He said, I want veterans to be able to push a blue button this fall so that you can download your personal health records to do with it what you wish. Share with them if you might, keep it if you wish. And Peter turned around and delivered it. 800,000 veterans have since downloaded their data via Blue Button. And Katie, who woke up within a week on the job at the State Department, having come from Google, Katie woke up to the Haitian earthquake. You remember the Haitian earthquake? The Haitian earthquake knocked out the 911 service in Haiti. So we had an information problem. How will people who need help connect to those who are willing to help? We had lots of supply. The military was down there, the Red Cross, a number of NGOs, but we had this information problem. Katie woke up the CEO of Digicel he was actually in the Himalayan mountains on holiday, but he had a satellite phone and he connected with her, and she said, quick, can you give us an SMS code for people to text in their complaints or their concerns? He said, sure. And moments later, 4636 was created and widely announced over the radios throughout Haiti that if you have a problem, text it into 4636. But there's another half to the problem. Who's going to be reading the messages as they come in? Jeff? You? Maybe. They had to create an instant organization to respond. So she turned to the NGO Ushahidi, where they decided that they would store all of this information and crowdsource the matchmaking so that anybody all around the world could log in, see a request, and then basically task it to one of the NGOs who might be willing to help. One more problem. Anyone know what language they speak in Haiti? Creole. Not a lot of folks in the State Department speak Creole. So the question was, who could translate a startup that I had never heard of called Crowdflower in this coalition said, guess what? We have the ability to syndicate tasks. We can accept a Creole message and task people from their desks at home to translate it and post it back. Grant, we went through 50,000 messages. And in this instant collaboration, a text message platform that hadn't existed before the earthquake hit, the ability to crowdsource the tasking through Ushahidi, and a Creole translation service with Crowdflower, all working together to meet the needs. The average turnaround time from when a text was issued to when someone on the ground was dispatched to solve it, 10 minutes. This is the power of open innovation, and why I'm so excited that you're bringing it here to Regina. Thank you so much.